Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
You're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the World Wrestling Federation developed a little bit of an attitude. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
And on the 8th day, God created me.
Joe Gimateo.
Bartlett, I don't want your belt. I want your ass.
I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history one episode of Raw at a time. But first, a special shout out to our new listener in Canada. Somebody up in the frigid north has been marathoning us. You poor bastard. We are thinking about you, and if you have some things you'd like to discuss or any ideas on some of the things we talk about, by all means, message us, send us an email, wrastlingraw@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
I apologize. He did mean about.
My bad. Also, just as a heads up for you constant listeners out there, we are going to be skipping a week next week. It's time for a little summer vacation, folks. We need it. Everybody needs it. So next week you will not get a new episode from us, but we will be back bright-eyed and bushy-tailed the following week. So, that being said, in this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on February 19th, 1996. This Raw was recorded at the Cincinnati Gardens in Cincinnati, Ohio, and features Vince McMahon and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Ready.
All right, then let's get into it. Monday Night Raw contains material too hot for some. Viewer discretion is advised. And by too hot, we mean sunny on a beach. But this time, it's a black bikini and black eyeliner. There was an audible thump from underneath my desk on this one. Last night at In Your House, things happened. Diesel got swallowed into the darkness, prompting The Undertaker to resume his hunt for lost souls. Razor Ramon will be challenging Goldust here tonight for the Intercontinental Championship, and we get a look at that amazing scene from In Your House 6 where Goldust is groping and caressing the AOL online tech support guy, that poor son of a bitch. And what about the Ultimate Warrior?
What?
Well, I have no fucking idea.
Warrior out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Crazy name drop to make, and yes, Ryan, out of nowhere. No foreshadowing of this at all. Oh, and also, we're going to have Billionaire Ted on Larry Fling almost live. That sounds fucking terrible, and it's the first time we're hearing about it here, so hopefully it's not that big of a deal. And after the classic intro, it's straight into our first match of the night. Razor Ramon defeats Goldust with Marlena by countout in 5 minutes and 35 seconds. Because the victory is via countout, Goldust will retain the Intercontinental title. The entrance for Goldust just keeps getting more and more elaborate, and I love it. I was surprised to see that Marlena was actually smoking the cigar this time. Usually the cigar isn't lit, but Goldust takes a moment at the top of the entryway to light it for her. While Razor is trying to tempt Goldust into coming straight at him before the match starts, Marlena intercepts Razor there at the corner, distracting him so Goldust can go around and climb into the ring out of Razor's view. Marlena then blows cigar smoke in Razor's face. Razor flicks his toothpick into Marlena's face. And that's how we get our setup in the ring before the match. Little things like this are what get me popping my ass off. I loved this little interplay. The bell rings, and Razor doesn't even wait for Goldust to get his gear off. He proceeds to beat the ever-loving shit out of Goldust. This was a red-hot start that looked great. Razor even spits in Goldust's face at one point. These two were working hard for each other at the start of this match, Goldust selling and Razor really giving us some energy. There was a great punch in the corner from Razor onto Goldust, followed up by a superplex that looked fantastic. Razor continued it with a fall-away slam that fell away over the top rope to the outside. This was a great spot. Then another belly-to-back suplex from the top turnbuckle, another move that looked great. That was it for Goldust, though. He was done. He took his Marlena and went home, walking out the entryway, leaving Razor to have the victory, but not the Intercontinental title. Razor is not happy about that, though. His arm is raised by the referee and his music starts playing, but we get a, "Hey yo, cut the music." He doesn't want Goldust's belt. He wants Goldust's ass, which could be interpreted a couple different ways given Goldust's gimmick and this whole storyline. Razor then calls out, and I quote, "Roddy Rowdy Piper." Razor does put down a great line, though, referring to Piper's background, saying they grew up in different neighborhoods, but the same streets, and follows that up by saying that he doesn't want his kids seeing this kind of stuff, meaning Goldust, on TV. The point of all this is that Razor wants another rematch with Goldust. Kind of surprised to hear that. So, this is where I ended the segment, and guys, this was a pretty good match to kick things off. The only thing that I would add to my previous notes is that I loved the finish. It wasn't drawn out, it wasn't milked for dramatic effect. It was just a quick, "Okay, I'm done, fuck you, you can have your win, but I'm keeping the belt," and walk out. And that's what I like to see. Joe, please, what did you think about our show opener?
You think I'm sexy? You think I'm hot? You're right. The promo at the end there with Razor Ramon really reminded me of the stuff he did in WCW as Scott Hall, just grabbing the mic and talking to the crowd like that. Not something we see too often here in WWF. So I enjoyed that, but the match was nice. I liked the entrance. I liked Marlena blowing the smoke in Razor's face, like you mentioned. I think the timing seemed a little bit off. It seemed like it took her too long to do it, but whatever. It got the point across, and I liked it. I liked Marlena's boots that she had on. I like that she's going for a different look almost every time we see her, looking great as always. Goldust was landing very awkwardly a lot in this match. I don't know if you guys noticed that. It just seemed like, I don't know, every time he would land on the mat, it just looked pretty awkward, like they didn't really know what each other was doing, but I think they still sort of worked pretty well together. And there was a time during the match where Razor sort of dumped Goldust over the top rope, and that was a pretty sweet move. I enjoyed that. A lot of stuff. It seemed like there was a lot of stuff in this short match that we haven't really seen before from anybody. So I enjoyed that. And I agree with you, Bartlett. I liked the ending where they just kind of walk out and then Razor Ramon cuts that promo. When I saw this match, when I saw them, coming to the ring, Razor was coming to the ring, and Vince is saying he's going to face Goldust, I was thinking right away, we're going to see the 1, 2, 3 kid. He's going to come out again and interfere, but it didn't happen, so I was happy with it.
I think we're all going to mention Goldust's entrance here as he lights Marlena's cigar. I thought that was just a really nice touch and something we haven't seen yet out of Goldust. But I was a little sad that they didn't use that cinematic video effect that they used at the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
The slowed down 24-frame widescreen effect. I don't know why they haven't went back to that, because I thought that gave a really extra effect to his entrance. But that being said, a really good way to come down to the ring, including Marlena trying to seduce Razor and then him flicking the toothpick into her face and then immediately rushing towards Goldust before he even gets a chance to take his jacket off. He gives him this hard clothesline and feathers fucking fly everywhere. It's like a Looney Tunes cartoon. It was a really great visual, followed by a hard slam just right on the Goldust face. More feathers flying before Razor rips the jacket off and just throws it into the crowd. I thought this was a fantastic beginning to a match. And they looked pretty good together. They slowed it down for a minute. They exchanged a sleeper hold with each other, but it didn't take long at all. They were right back into it, where Razor gave that suplex off the top rope, and then that classic fall away slam from Razor, except this time outside of the ring. And Goldust comes back in, and he gets slammed again, and at that point, he had enough, and he collects his shit and walks out. I agree. I enjoyed this ending because we've seen a couple guys attempt this. Jeff Jarrett, I believe, attempted the walkout, but was stopped before he could do it and thrown back in. And it's one of those old school classic heel maneuvers, but I thought it got pulled off good here because we haven't really seen anyone actually do it in a long time. And it's a good way to get the crowd to just really hate you. So if they're going to set up another match between which it appears after Razor cuts a pretty good promo here, calling on Rowdy to allow him to have another match against Goldust, which I think, Joe, you mentioned I'm kind of surprised about. What we've heard about backstage in real life, what Razor thought about this feud. So he might not be happy about it, but I think from what we've seen here, it could be an entertaining feud.
Yeah, agreed on all points. I was really surprised, as I mentioned, to hear that he wanted another rematch, given that by all accounts, he wasn't too thrilled with his ongoing thing with Goldust. And specifically because he mentions, and maybe this is an example of, art imitating reality, but he specifically mentions that he doesn't want kids seeing this kind of stuff, the Goldust behavior. And I took that to mean during his promo that he wants to, fuck up Goldust enough so that he can't wrestle anymore and therefore won't be on our screens. But just the fact that they're going to keep going with this. I mean, I like it, but it's also surprising. All right, still to come, Tatanka versus The Undertaker. Sounds amazing. Plus, what is Roddy Piper up to? The Ultimate Warrior? I don't know. Then we get a brief view of Paul Bearer in a dark corner of the Cincinnati Gardens, wailing over a casket that The Undertaker then steps out of and starts his walk to the ring. I don't think that match is the next match, but we'll see. I guess it depends on how long it takes Undertaker to walk to the ring.
He does walk slowly.
He does. Let's go to the WWF store with Doc Hendricks real quick. He's got that Undertaker sweatshirt on Wendy, and it still looks just as good as it did when we saw it on In Your House 6. And then what the hell is this? We're going to go again to Doc Hendricks, but this time it's the true Cocaine Jam. Doc is there with the G.E. Smith House Band again. Looks like they've gone on tour and are hitting up Cincinnati. Doc loves it, and I feel his buzz as he gets into it. He breaks down the events of In Your House 6 for us. And when I say he gives us a breakdown of events, he really unloads the entire schedule of events that happened at In Your House 6. But then we see Vader coming out, who is apparently unscheduled, and that's where we'll end this segment. But before we move along, Joe, just real quick, did you have anything on this week's Cocaine Jam or the other material we received in this segment?
Well, I guess The Undertaker is Dracula now. He lives in a casket. I didn't know that. He's Bela Lugosi now. Doc's Cocaine Jam was pretty horrible because, like you said, it just recapped like half of the In Your House event. So, not much to say there. It just seemed like I usually enjoy Doc's Cocaine Jams a little bit, but this was just filler for me.
I'll start off with The Undertaker and coming out of the casket. I thought it was a pretty good visual outside of him never coming out of a casket before. Yeah. So I wonder if that's going to play into anything else tonight. Probably not. But the way he slowly wrapped his hand around it and opened it, it was a great visual. It looked like a horror movie. But it was just a little bit confusing because we've never seen it before. But Cocaine Jam, yeah, not much else to add. It's a complete rundown of what we just talked about last week.
Yeah, nothing much to add there. Pretty straightforward segment. And we're going to move along now to what was technically supposed to be our next match. The Body Donnas, Skip and Zip with Sonny versus Barry Horowitz and Aldo Montoya ends in a no contest. There's no match time here because the Body Donnas never came to the ring and the bell was never rung. This was, however, what was supposedly scheduled to go on. So Vader has interrupted the setup for the match. This is where we ended the last segment. Gets in the ring and proceeds to lay out both Aldo Montoya and Barry Horowitz in quick fashion, giving Aldo an ugly chokeslam. Vader then takes Horowitz to the corner, and the hits are looking stiff as Vader takes it to him. And here's where we get word from Vince that he doesn't think the scheduled match is going to happen. And then that's it. Vince signals that we're going to move on, so that's where I ended this. I was pretty surprised that Vince didn't sell this with the kind of disgust and vehemence that he usually does. Vince was actually pretty blasé about the whole thing. I would have expected it to be he has no right to be here, oh, the TARDIS, something like that, the usual Vince kind of thing. But I do have to ask, just briefly, guys, Ryan first, what did you think about what was supposed to be a match, but ended up being a way to keep Vader front and center in our minds?
Well, I mean, I guess it did that. It was a way to continue to make Vader look like an animal. He came out in here and interrupted what was supposed to be a tag team, so he basically threw himself into a handicap match and murdered these two guys. I have to say this firmly puts Horowitz back into the jobber status, and I think maybe it descended Montoya into jobber status as well. Maybe if we get him into an actual match where he jobs out and there's a real victory, I will be doing him as a jobber of a week very soon.
Yeah, Bartlett, you mentioned that Vince was very blasé about this, and I said that last week as well In Your House when Vader came out. It was like, nobody cares. Like, this guy's suspended, but he's out there, and it's just no big deal that he's beating the shit out of people. Normally they would have, Pat Patterson would be coming out, Jerry Briscoe, all those guys would come out to try to, control this psychopath, but nobody comes out. Like, he just comes out and beats up Jockface and Barry Horowitz, and he's done. And I guess it's a way to keep Vader on our screens during his healing from his shoulder injury, because I noticed that, he's coming out with like a jacket and stuff on. So I wonder if he's wearing some sort of, I don't know, bandage of some sort that they don't want people to see. But he's just coming out beating up random people. In Your House, he came out and beat up Yokozuna, so you thought, oh, maybe there's going to be a feud there, but now he's coming out and beating up these random jobbers, so who knows?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot that one can say about this, considering that it was pretty sparse in content as far as just everything goes. As you say, it's Vader just smearing a couple guys. The one critique that I have of it is that it would have been nice if the match had at least gotten started. I think it would be more impressive and more noteworthy if Vader had come out and smeared 4 guys instead of 2. Or if maybe he would have just gotten, a quick hit in on the Body Donnas, and then them being the heels, they could have just tucked their tails and ran while Vader finished up with Montoya and Horowitz. But again, I think that would have been more interesting. As it exists, it kind of fell a little bit flat. I don't really blame Vince for not getting excited. And now there's a reference to Roddy Piper that instead becomes the Ultimate Warrior entrance video and music? What the hell? And that's it. No context. No additional information. No nothing. We move on to WrestleMania commercial for tickets to the event. And then a scene of a thigh under a red teddy with Sonny sensually singing Happy Birthday against a piano rendition of the same. To the president? Jesus, this is just pathetic. The impersonator is one thing, but my God, they're just trying to be obnoxious at this point, I think. And then, speaking of obnoxious, we get a view of Bob Backlund in the crowd campaigning for president there in Cincinnati. Just Real quick, Ryan, you've had some time to cool off on him. You know, he went away. Maybe you can miss him now. So, fresh eyes, was this a pro or con for you?
When I saw Bob Backlund, you know, the kids are screaming at him in the crowd and we don't hear him. So, but he seems to really be getting a good reaction out of these kids. And the fact that he seems to be entertaining these kids and it wasn't long and we didn't hear him, I'm going to mark this as a positive.
Okay, just a second.
I mean, thanks to the kids, though.
Yes, no doubt. Thanks for the kids. Yeah.
Well, we'll take what we can get.
They showed up and showed their true hatred for Bob Backlund.
Those kids were working it good.
Yes.
Something that generally doesn't work good. Unfortunately, next up is the entrance music for Marty Jannetty, leading into our next match. The Ringmaster, with Ted DiBiase, defeats Marty Jannetty by submission in 5 minutes and 45 seconds. Guys, Jannetty had 0 tassels.
Yeah.
I was in complete and utter shock at this.
Well, Sonny told us there would be material for mature audiences, so Marty was naked.
What's more mature than a lack of tassels? And then comes the Ringmaster, complete with his own music now, and the start of a goatee, and black trunks and black pads, even prompting Vince to call this man a stone cold man.
Bald head, too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's right. That's right. Not trying to go for the male pattern baldness crew cut anymore.
Yep.
The Ringmaster and Jannetty trade tie-ups and holds in the opening sequence. It didn't look too bad. There are then a ton of traded holds ending in traded pinfalls and 2 counts. This was a lightning fast series and it looked great. What looked even better was the Ringmaster tossing Jannetty out of the ring in disgust. Something we all wish we could have done once or twice. Something that was also very interesting is the frequent looks into the hard camera that the Ringmaster gives, staring at us, the viewers, with an icy gaze. There's a commercial break, and we come back to things significantly slowed down. The Ringmaster puts Jannetty in a submission hold, forcing Jannetty to crawl to the ropes. I thought that looked great. And at this point, though, the Ringmaster is firmly in control of the match, moving from submission attempt to submission attempt. Jannetty does do a pretty good job of breaking these various holds and forcing the Ringmaster to adapt. But as things slowly tip back into Jannetty's favor, it doesn't last long as the Ringmaster reverses into the $1 Million Dream, securing the victory as he slowly, hopefully, smothers Marty Jannetty to death. So there are a lot of noticeable differences here already, guys. It seems like the evolution of Steve Austin is going to be a quick one, and we are going to get it step by step. Joe, please, what did you think of this match?
The mentions of Stone Cold, I mean, Vince says it at least 3 times, and it's very distracting now looking at it in hindsight. So the match itself I thought was okay. I kind of don't really like how they keep talking about Austin as like this great technical wrestler, because I see him as more of a brawler type, you know? He's definitely showing that a little bit more in each match that he has. He's probably just kind of getting comfortable with some of the guys that he's working with, since he's still fairly new in the WWF. So yeah, you're definitely seeing that very slow transition into Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I have to think Steve Austin had probably already had that conversation with Vince at this point. Like, hey, I'm going to switch to this gimmick out of this Ringmaster thing. And maybe Vince was like sort of testing it out here. So I kind of like that. I like that they didn't just all of a sudden change it.
Yeah.
Kind of giving us a little teaser for it. And also a teaser that Marty Jannetty has a new tag team partner.
Yes.
Oh boy. Can't wait for that one. I thought the match was good. I liked the crossface that Austin had on Jannetty as a time killer hold. I thought that was a little bit better than just your standard Vulcan nerve pinch or, some of the other stuff we see. I thought that was a little different, so I enjoyed that. But yeah, it's really exciting to now see that, he's really, really transitioning into that Stone Cold Steve Austin character.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, we said it's pretty clear from the beginning here with Vince McMahon calling him a Stone Cold Man, and he's got the beginnings of the goatee, bald head, and he even is starting a bit of the Stone Cold swagger. Instead of wearing the $1 million belt, it's over his shoulder.
Yeah.
And he's got not the quite Stone Cold strut, but it's like halfway in between right now. And then you could see a little bit of the difference here, a bit of the Ringmaster gimmick once the match starts. And I think that's especially evident towards the beginning. Marty has Steve Austin in a submission move, and he kind of just works his way to the ring and like wraps his leg around it slowly to break the submission. And that's something you wouldn't see Stone Cold do. He would forcefully get himself out of a submission, not slowly make it to the ring and kind of take the coward's way out, so to speak. But I thought he looked really good here. And Marty was working for him fairly well as well. The spot where they went to the commercial was a little bit odd. It just kind of went to black. And then we came back and it was clear that it was a commercial break. But when they did that, the Ringmaster was in control, and he starts going from like unique submission to unique submission. Joe, you mentioned it's not your standard vocal nerve pinch, abdominal stretch, chokehold. He's putting in these submission moves that look really sophisticated and stuff that I've never seen before. So those are some things that were really interesting to see out of Stone Cold, because that's something he's going to put completely behind him very soon. So to wrap it up, it was a short match. Vince 3 or 4 times called him Stone Cold, so it's clear us here in hindsight where things are going. But I'm really enjoying watching this transition of Stone Cold, or I should say the Ringmaster into Stone Cold.
Yeah, there's really not much else to add to this. It's just really, really cool to see what amounts to the creation of our generation's Hulk Hogan. You can make that argument for The Rock as opposed to Stone Cold, but, Stone Cold came first, and Stone Cold is probably one of, I'm not going to say the only, but one of the reasons I got back into wrestling as much as I did as a teenager. Really, really excited to see where this goes and to start tracing that chunk of history, because a lot of nostalgia tied up in that, a lot of good memories. Speaking of the list of names that are in that small handful of people that just absolutely tied me back into wrestling to the point where I am doing a wrestling podcast at the age of 38. The next segment, a Mankind vignette, and boy howdy, we get our first view of Mankind. This is with George the Rat in the deepest, dankest cellars of whatever this place is, wherever it is. The things that Mankind says are chilling. For example, on the 8th day, God created mankind. Why was he having such a bad day? Why did he create all of you normal and forgot so many important parts of me? Fantastic stuff. That's just a highlight. He says much more than this. And he finishes up with, maybe God should have slept on that day too. I can't say or overstate how revolutionary this feels to me. We're coming off of years worth of a generic version of the say your prayers and eat your vitamins. All of the babyface promos we've had have kind of amounted to just that. I'm the good guy, listen to me, I'm going to beat the bad guy. And here we have this that just takes such a, philosophic turn, an esoteric turn, or whatever you want to call it, but this is finally something that you can kind of sink your teeth in and really get your brain cranking on. And all in all, just to me, fucking amazing. Joe, what did you think about our first full view of Mankind?
I want to go back a little bit, I guess. You mentioned, Stone Cold Steve Austin being our generation's Hulk Hogan, which is true. I mean, Vince basically says that Stone Cold Steve Austin is the greatest superstar of all time, which tells me he probably drew the most money of all time.
I was going to say, yeah, I think to this day, he still holds like the merchandise titles, all of it belong to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when people think about the Attitude Era, they think immediately of The Rock and Austin. They had their 3 matches at WrestleMania. But that next guy, if you want to put him at number 3, if you were going to put him at number 2, I probably wouldn't even argue, but Mick Foley was there too. Huge part of the Attitude Era. And here he is in 1996, February. We have yet to see him in a match, and already giving us some of the best vignettes that we've ever seen since, we started doing this from 93 till now. And we see George the Rat, Jim Cornette's Rat. I mean, that's just incredible. All of the creative for this is just incredible. And I would love to know who was a part of it. If this is all Mick Foley, if it's Mick Foley and Jim Cornette, if Bruce Pritchard and Vince are involved. I mean, I have to think Vince is involved for sure. But I would just love to know, like, who came up with this stuff, because it is just fucking genius, all of it.
Yeah. Anyone out there that's listening to this is the Mankind vignette. The one with George is probably one of the most memorable vignettes that Mankind does. And maybe one of the most memorable vignettes that have ever been done, to be honest with you, because this lives up to all of the years of praise that it got. When we get that first shot of Mankind sitting there just rocking back and forth, looking like an absolute psycho, and unlike a lot of other people in the past when they're playing this madman type gimmick, they start rambling off stuff that just doesn't really make sense or isn't even coherent. But everything he says here is cerebral. It all makes perfect sense. And this looks like a professional horror movie scene. And I don't think we've seen anything like that even come close in a vignette yet. They all have that very wrestling feel to them. And this looks like it could have been shot straight out of Hollywood. I am so excited to see Mankind. I mean, this vignette gave me goosebumps. You talk about the different people who made the Attitude Era, and as much as I liked Stone Cold, and I did, Mankind is who made it for me. He was the person who, I own shirts of. I've made his fucking mask at this point for a bachelor party. I mean, he is one of the biggest superstars in my mind that exists, and I'm so excited.
It's nice you mentioned the Hollywood feel to it. It's like a Hannibal Lecter character, but like more clear craziness to it.
One of the things, besides the content, of what he's saying, the other thing that really struck me about this is, for lack of a better word, the set that he's on. We have, take your pick of vignettes that we've praised in the past. We praised it for the content being said, but if you look behind the people giving the promo, and this includes the Undertaker and Paul Bearer, it's the first thing that comes to mind for me personally. There were quite a few where you're watching it and it's like, wow, that's a great vignette, that's a great promo. But in the back of your head, you're like, and they obviously just filmed that in a high school hallway.
Right.
You know, you can see the cinder block behind them. You can see the industrial sprinkler system, and it was very obviously filmed someplace where they just happened to be. Whereas this, I couldn't tell you where this was. It sure as hell did not look like it was in the Cincinnati Gardens. It looked like a deep, dank cellar.
It looked like a Dark Ages dungeon that he was kept in. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just something to be said about those three guys, The Rock, Austin, and Mankind, Mick Foley, with like their acting abilities. I mean, first off, they're all three really smart guys, educated guys. They're all great actors. They understand timing and, how to deliver things. And, you look at a guy like Ahmed Johnson, for example. It's like, well, he's got charisma, but he doesn't really have that ability that those three guys have. Just doesn't have that timing or that ability to deliver a promo or acting like those three guys.
Yeah. Fucking Ahmed Johnson. I'm going to smear you. I'm going to kick him.
Well, and like, a guy we talked about tonight, the Ultimate Warrior, he's another one. It's like, well, he's got the charisma. It's just like, I don't know. He's not really a great actor.
So Joe, quick question. In your observer reading, what's up with Ahmed Johnson right now? We haven't seen him in a while. Is he off to train a little bit to learn some better skills?
I will give you a nice story later when we go over the news.
Great. I'm glad.
It won't answer your question, but it'll shed a little bit of light maybe on where he's been.
Still looking forward to it.
Yeah, I hope this doesn't spoiler anything for you, Joe, but for the record, Ahmed did participate in a dark match after the cameras turned off in your House 6.
I see.
I can't remember the opponent, but he was there. He was present in wrestling, so he's not completely gone. He just hasn't been on our screens recently.
Too many botched spine busters.
All right, well, that's just amazing Mankind vignettes will lead us straight into our final match of the night. The Undertaker with Paul Bearer defeats Tatanka with the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase by pinfall in 4 minutes and 25 seconds. After Tatanka gets to the ring, but before The Undertaker's entrance, we get a commercial for the 96 Slammy Awards, and then a pitch for next week's Raw, featuring Yokozuna, Jake the Snake Roberts, and a very special face-to-face encounter between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. We come back to the ring in time to hear the bell tolling and The Undertaker making his way down to the ring. Once the work starts here, it is somewhat clear that Tatanka hasn't been in the ring much recently. Undertaker no-sold a chop that looked great, and I just couldn't not note that Tatanka was telegraphing a lot in this, and none of it really looked good. And then here we are, Diesel. Of course, Diesel comes out with an axe, and whenever he was coming out carrying that axe, I thought shit was about to get real. I was like, okay, this is a turn that I can maybe
This is
get
something
behind.
new.
Yes.
An edged weapon.
Yeah.
Mature audiences only.
Yeah. But all he does is grab a cameraman and then head back up the entryway. We cut to commercial then and come back to a split screen. On the right side is the match, and on the left is Diesel destroying the Undertaker's casket with that axe. And it goes on for a while.
His house.
That's his home.
Yeah, just...
That casket was pretty solidly built because it takes quite some time to do some damage to it. Unfortunately, this was just too much of a distraction for me, even though I didn't have, a strong desire to see Tatanka barely working some of these moves. It was still just hard to make good observations on what amounted to a minimized screen there. Taker does get the pinfall on 3 count from a tombstone piledriver, but then finally sees on the Proto-Titantron the replay of Diesel destroying the casket. Tatanka and the $1 Million Man are running up the entryway ahead of The Undertaker to try to get out of the camera angle as The Undertaker goes on a mission. And that's where I'll end it. I am both shocked and dismayed that we are using another prop to heat up an Undertaker angle. First it was the urn, and now it's the fucking casket. At least we can't melt down the casket pieces, so there's that. Ryan, please, what did you think of our final match tonight?
At the beginning here, when I'm seeing it's Tatanka versus Undertaker, I'm wondering to myself, and maybe Joe, you would know this, is Tatanka part of the BSK group? Because it seems like this is like the 3rd or 4th time that if we're just going to get a generic match out of The Undertaker, it's against Tatanka.
Not that I'm aware. I don't think he is.
Okay. It just seems odd that he seems to match up against Tatanka fairly often on Raw. And most of the time, it's for a pretty solid match. This was maybe an exception to that. One, because Tatanka was clearly working through some ring rust, but it was mostly because of over half the match was viewed through split screen. Once Diesel comes out with the axe and heads backstage, we're so focused on that we kind of forget this match, kind of like a jobber match, where we just are focused on the split screen. And there were some good things out of The Undertaker that happened on the split screen. Like, I always love that spot from Taker where he's laying there emotionless until the opponent gets right over top of him and he grabs him by the neck and stands up. It's a great spot, but it was ruined by split screen. So was the choke slam. So was the tombstone. I mean, everything here was just, oh, are you paying attention to Diesel destroying the Taker's casket? Or are you going to pay attention to the match? It usually ends up in you paying attention to neither. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happened here. I thought the way it ended, it made Taker look strong. It was just overshadowed by so much split screen that I don't understand. Why don't you do this at the beginning or end of the match? You don't have to interrupt the match itself and just ruin it like you did. You could do it after, but they decided to go for during the match, and I thought it really hurt what could have been at least a serviceable match.
Yeah, I think next week's Raw should start with The Undertaker talking to the Cincinnati crowd and letting them know that he just lost everything. This man lost his home. It's gone. They're going to have to send in the 6x9 cards wishing him well and finding a new home.
His homeowner's insurance policy didn't cover diesel power.
Ryan, I agree with you with the split screen. It seems like that's all they cared about here. And I don't know if it was my TV brightness or like I could barely see what Diesel was doing. I mean, I could tell he was destroying a casket, but it was like so dark. It was just poor lighting. I don't know. This was kind of a waste. And for a guy like Tatanka, I mean, Tatanka was a pretty solid mid-carder when he was here. And now that he's back, you just kind of throw him into this. I don't know. It just seems out of place. And he's still with Ted DiBiase. It just didn't seem right to me. I would rather see Tatanka just face some jobbers or maybe be a part of a tag team or something. I don't know. It just didn't really work for me. And I think that this Undertaker and Diesel feud were continuing to keep that going into WrestleMania. And I don't really care about it that much. I mean, I like both guys, but I just don't really care about this feud. They're not doing anything that makes me really want The Undertaker to kick Diesel's ass because Diesel's still doing this tweener shit.
And, one thing I'm going to bring up that's kind of interesting is the WrestleMania Undertaker versus Diesel match. I can't remember if it's good or not, but that is officially the spot where I started back in watching wrestling every week. I watched that pay-per-view, that match against Undertaker and Diesel, and I continued to watch for almost a decade after that. So that is the point where I jumped back on. So I'm kind of excited to see that just for nostalgia reasons.
Yeah. I feel that same way when we mentioned Vince mentions there's going to be an interview with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels next week. Mm-hmm. I kind of felt that same way. I was like, oh, here we go. Like this is the official start to the Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels, real life feud and everything. Like this is the start to it. So yeah, looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, agreed on all points here. And, Ryan, I think it was you that said, why not do this at the beginning or end of the match? The end of this match would have been a perfect time to show this video of Diesel destroying the casket because The Undertaker could have stood there and watched it on the Titantron. That would have given, Tatanka and the $1 Million Man plenty of time to get out of there so they weren't scrambling to get out of The Undertaker's way. It could have just added to the story in a way that didn't take us out of this match. But I suppose we had to make sure there was plenty of time for what's about to come. Back at ringside, Vince sells the hell out of Diesel with the axe. Meanwhile, the replay continues in the background, the thumping of an axe on wood. And we will go now to Larry Fling hosting Billionaire Ted. I'm glad we did the split screen so that there was plenty of room for this. There was just, we've said quite a bit about the whole Billionaire Ted thing already. So I want you, our listeners, to just understand what I mean when I say that this was a significant step down. I didn't think it could get any worse, but this got worse. Never thought that I would be able to say that.
Yeah.
For those of you out there that just need a little bit of context on this, Larry King is a news anchor. I'm not sure how much actual news he really did in his career, but he pretty much made his name being a radio and then cable news host where he would interview just various important people, celebrities, entrepreneurs, sports figures, anybody that was anybody got interviewed by Larry King. So that's the ripoff here, and Larry Fling is hosting Billionaire Ted. Part of what Larry King used to do is take callers' questions. So Larry Fling is going to do that also. For example, we've got Randy from Atlanta. Randy is on the phone saying, "Ooh, yeah," and complaining about having thinning hair. And then there's Terry from Tampa, who we find out is the huckster. Terry from Tampa is asking for the night off after being hit by a size 7 lady's shoe. You can just use your imagination to figure out what that means. Then someone pretending to be Ted's wife, calling to let him know that his Sears suits are finished. What a fucking just cheap shot. Then they get to the meat.
You mean Hanoi Jane?
Arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listing all of the so-called disreputable actions of Billionaire Ted. I'm not going to list them here, but it is just fucking pathetic all around. And then we get the even worse news that this is apparently going to continue. Of course it will. Next week, Larry's guests will be the Huckster and the Nacho Man, and they are there to discuss their upcoming match at WrestleMania 12, which fucking disturbing because while this might just be a rib on us all, I would totally not be surprised if we get some kind of stupid fucking tuxedo underwear style gimmick comedy match from the Huckster and the Nacho Man during WrestleMania 12. I hope it doesn't happen, but again, I would not be surprised at this point.
Speaking of, where's Harvey Whippleman been?
Oh, I don't know. Probably driving the talent around.
Or with Bertha Faye.
Oh.
He must still be there, or he's going to come back, because I know that he was like kind of behind the scenes working with The Rock when he first came in.
Because the last we saw him, he was doing the thing with Bertha Faye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he got wedged between her ass cheeks and hasn't crawled out yet.
Maybe he's going to be the guest referee for the Huckster versus the Nacho Man.
Oh, God, that'd
How
be perfect.
exciting.
We then move to the Undertaker and Paul Bearer coming upon the scene of the carnage, the pieces of the casket strewn about the place, and Paul Bearer is wailing incomprehensibly and ends it by wailing, "Diesel, you'll pay for this!" That's a horrible, horrible impersonation of Paul Bearer, but please go back and watch this because it was very loud and very high-pitched. And that is where we fade to black. Ryan, what did you think of the way that Raw ended tonight?
Good Lord. This just keeps on getting worse and worse with the Billionaire Ted shit. Now we have him in this Larry King parody thing, and they're continuing with this Saturday Night Live skit bullshit, but instead of being funny, it's just another vessel for them to bitch and moan and whine about it not being fair. It's really bad, and it's a bad look. It's just a bad look for the WWF that you look like such whiny bitches here. And I don't have much else to say there. Paul Bearer wailing at the top of his lungs to end it, though, made up a little bit of it because that was fun to watch.
Yeah, the Billionaire Ted stuff, I feel like I keep repeating myself. I just can't believe how much of this they were doing.
Oh, it was so long.
Yeah. I continue to be just shocked. Like I knew this, I remember this stuff happening, but not every week, and just taking like this was way too long. They're really bad comedy actors, really bad. Worse than any horrible Saturday Night Live stuff that's been done.
This guy playing Billionaire Ted, I think every week he leans into Jimmy Stewart voice even more.
Yeah.
It's fucking terrible.
I was really tempted to fast forward this. Like it was so bad. I couldn't take it. Like it's just not funny at all. And now they're like, I know they're public figures, but like going after the guy's wife, that's now you're making it personal. Like, that has nothing to do with WCW or what you think he's doing to your company. It's kind of a low blow to bring the guy's wife into it. And the pallbearer screeching was pretty funny. And thank goodness that ended the show and not Larry Fling and Billionaire Ted.
Yeah, agreed on all points there. Just when you think it can't get any worse. And not only that, it's going to continue at least one more week.
Might as well at this point.
Yeah. It makes me wonder, just because, you hear in shoot interviews the various people that have worked with Vince McMahon over the years. He seems like, while he is definitely the alpha male of the WWF, he is the man in charge and nothing happens without his say-so. It seems like, from most accounts, that he is also a smart enough businessman to listen to somebody that has a differing opinion. It's, as a matter of fact, a lot of stories out there talk about how he respects people who voice their differing opinions more than he respects the yes-men, which I suppose is maybe, up for debate since Pritchard's still there, but...
I think that's probably common in a lot of alpha type people. They respect people who will actually stand up to them more than people that will cower.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder, though, did nobody stand up and say, Vince, we should really this isn't working. This isn't a good look, as you say.
Yeah. Well, he thinks it's hilarious. His sense of humor is just so bizarre and thinks it's hilarious.
And I think on this topic, there's probably so many yes men at WWF laughing their asses off every time he shows them one of these skits that he thinks is the best thing in the world.
Yeah, and it's funny, too, now, 25 years later, all we hear about is what a scumbag Eric Bischoff was and giving away finishes and all this stuff, but, like, nobody talks about this. Like, this stuff is way worse than anything Eric Bischoff did, in my opinion.
All right, that ended the episode, so let's take it on over now to highlights and lowlights. Joe, why don't you go first?
I am going to give two highlights from this show. The first one is the transition to Stone Cold Steve Austin. It hasn't officially happened yet, guys, but I think the next time we see the Ringmaster, he might not be called the Ringmaster. Ooh. And I did not cheat on that and look it up, but I just have that feeling now after seeing that.
He's very close.
Yeah. And my other highlight is, of course, the Mankind vignette, where we get a full glimpse of Mankind and George the Rat. For my low light, it's just too easy, guys. Larry Fling, Billionaire Ted, it's just horrible.
So I'm going to be paralleling you, Joe, here tonight. I only picked one highlight. It was a tough one. I thought this was, outside of the ending, a fairly strong Raw, and the transition of Stone Cold really stands out, but my love of Mankind it couldn't be overcome, and my highlight was the Mankind vignette with George the Rat. I couldn't pick anything else. He's one of my all-time favorites, so of course I had to go with him. And the low light, it's been a while since I resorted to the Billionaire Ted skits, but this one was especially bad. And the length of it, combined with the patheticness of it, made it nothing but the low light.
Well, guys, we are 3 for 3 on highlights. Of course, it was going to be the Mankind vignette for me for reasons I've already stated. And I would only add, I think that anybody that is interested in the spoken or written word should go back and just give these a glance. Even if you're not a wrestling fan, I'm not going to, hold them up there against Shakespeare or anything like that necessarily. But for a wrestling promo, this is just, Ryan, as you said, cerebral. It is immaculate. It is so fucking perfect and entertaining and gripping. It is exactly what they needed to do to hook me in and get my money, which is the goal of all of this. And they are succeeding in that with this. I will differ with you guys on my low light. For once, I was able to be objective enough to not jump straight to Billionaire Ted, although it was tempting because it was very insufferable and pathetic. But for my low light tonight, I am going with the Vader run-in and what was supposed to be a Body Donna's Horowitz Aldo Montoya match. As I said in my breakdown there when we were discussing it, if we could have just had at least the start of a match. But we didn't get that. All we got was this run-in that was just kind of poorly timed. Yes, it has kept Vader fresh in our minds, but at what cost? Because now fresh Vader in our minds equals boring, blasé, nobody gives a shit.
When he has no business being down here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think this Vader run-in did any favors for anybody anywhere. I think this was a net negative for everybody involved, so that'll be my low light. Joseph, do you have any contemporary wrestling news from on and around February 19th, 1996 for us?
Yes, I do. From the Wrestling Observer, Dave Meltzer is reporting that Vince McMahon is coming out guns blazing on his war with the Turner Empire. Among his maneuvers, see what I did there?
Yeah.
Over the past 7 days include the following. Filing a complaint with the FTC claiming TBS has been engaged in a systematic plan to destroy the WWF.
What a bitch.
Taking out a quarter-page ad in the New York Times on both Wednesday and Thursday this week.
Snarf.
Having Jerry McDevitt, the WWF lawyer, send a letter to Eric Bischoff demanding an apology for Bischoff's televised insinuations and other similar insinuations on the WCW hotline that Titan Sports may have been responsible for the power failure in Lakeland, Florida. During a Nitro show, they had a power outage and Eric Bischoff blamed Titan Sports. And Vince wants an apology now. Writing a letter to Ted Turner complaining about WCW reinstituting blading and promising bloodbaths on their Super Brawl pay-per-view show coming up.
Jesus, what a snowflake.
Yeah.
I'm starting to wonder if the baby bottle match was a bit of a Freudian slip from Vince and him being a giant fucking baby.
You want him to have that water squirted in his face from that Double Dare baby bottle. Well, one thing that came up, too, is Vince took over a bunch of territories before all of this. I mean, he basically did what he claims Bischoff is doing. And it's funny because Vince McMahon claims that he bought his competition in order to keep his business alive. That's his excuse for that. And he thinks that he's just being attacked by a guy who's already a billionaire and doesn't need a wrestling company. Just doesn't come off well. We reported last week that Davey Boy Smith was in a trial for aggravated assault. He was acquitted on February 7th in his 8-day trial. The judge decided that the injuries were not caused by Davey Boy Smith, and those are the only details I have. And like I said last week or 2 weeks ago, Smith was forced on the witness stand to admit that pro wrestling was fake.
But unlike the guy's lawyer, it did not destroy Davey Boy's credibility on the stand.
Yeah. I reported a couple weeks ago that Billy Gunn has an injury right now. So I guess that injury must be bad enough that they're going to have a tag team tournament in which the final will be at WrestleMania. And as of right now, it's scheduled to take place during the pre-show, which further cheapens the tag team titles.
Oh, man.
Are we going to get the headbangers officially here?
I don't know. I feel like maybe they left and came back later.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm not sure. Haven't heard anything about them recently. We talked about the Warrior, the Ultimate Warrior, as Vince would say. Another thing lending credence to Warrior coming back is that the company could potentially lose several top baby faces, not just the rumored Razor Ramon and Diesel to WCW. People seem to think maybe that's why the Warrior is coming back. Jeff Jarrett suffered a serious back injury on February 17th in Memphis, taking a bump wrong against Ahmed Johnson.
Oh, my God.
There it is.
There it is. Injuring Jeff Jarrett. So no report on the seriousness of that, but I'm sure we'll stay on top of that the next few weeks here. And officially, Vader has signed a 2-year deal with WWF. And this deal allows him to also work in Japan, which is a bit unique because I don't think Vince at this time really let anyone else do that. So
No, I think that's why the Steiner brothers left, because he wouldn't let them,
yeah,
right?
I think you're right.
Scott Hall, too.
Yep. So it appears as though Vader is here to stay for a little bit, and that is all.
All right. Thank you, Joseph. Illuminating as always. And that's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. And if you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW and just add @gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media and on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and let your friends know how much cooler they would be if they became Rawheads like you and me. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on February 26, 1996. And when I say next week, I mean 2 weeks from now, don't forget. The Raw that aired on February 26, 1996 with matches featuring Jake the Snake Roberts, Shinobi, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.